Good afternoon. I'm Brian Haggerty, Chair of the El Paso Community College Board of Trustees. Welcome to the August 17th special meeting. This is our third and final meeting on our budget. Anyone in the public would like to join this meeting, you can go to www.youtube.com/user/goepcc. I want to welcome everyone here this afternoon. Belle, can you please, or Pam, call the roll?
Belle can do it too.
No. Either one. Flip a coin.
Mr. Uxer. Here. Mrs. Robles.
Here.
Ms. Nahara.
Here.
Dr. Graham. Ms. Sanchez.
Here.
Mr. Haggerty. Here. Do we have any public comment?
Sure.
No?
No, I haven't received anything yet.
Okay. Okay, read number 5, Pam.
Section 5, item 5.1, Mr. Fernando Flores, Interim Vice President of Financial and Administrative Operations, will provide an update on the budget development process for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Haggerty, members of the board, Dr. Serrata. Prior to today, there have been 2 previous budget presentations. One on June 30th, where we presented very preliminary budget information, and the second on August the 9th, where the budget presentation included updated revenues and an updated baseline budget. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss a salary enhancement in the context of budget strategies in the following presentation. The agenda today will cover a review of the state funding per House Bill 8, which is historic in nature, changing the way our appropriation is given to the community colleges. We're going to talk about funding strategies for fiscal year 23-24, then a discussion of salary enhancement for the coming year, and then talk about next steps for adoption of the 23-24 operating budget. As a refresher, I would like to go over the funding formula for House Bill 8 and how it has benefited the college. What is different from previous year's model is our previous appropriations in years past were set for the biennium or 2 fiscal years. What's important to understand is that going forward, state appropriations may change from year to year. So the draft of the funding model was released on July 14th, 2023, which resulted in our appropriation numbers that are in our revenue projections supporting the budget. And those are going to be approved by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on August the 22nd, when it will adopt emergency rules to implement the model. As a reminder, it consists of 2 parts: the performance tier, of which we're going to benefit to the tune of $38,675,854 for fiscal year 24, or an increase of 22.6%. Over fiscal year 2023, when the appropriation was $31,545,292. Future appropriations will depend on performance metrics being met after fiscal year 2024. The final appropriation is to be set on August the 22nd. The second part of the appropriation is composed of the financial aid for Swift Transfer, FAST. That is related to the dual credit early college high school numbers that we're going to be reporting. It's historic in nature. We've never received that appropriation before. It is projected to come in between $2.1 million and $2.4 million. Our projected revenues, however, are budgeted at $2 million, a very conservative number, because this will be determined by our actual enrollments going forward. Once approved, fiscal year 24 funding will be set for the entire fiscal year unless there are some errors reported to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And those type of things might be, we might self-report some numbers that should not have been reported, so we have the option to self-report, and we usually do that instead of them finding our errors. If we find any, we like to report them to them in advance. The performance tier funding will be calculated each fiscal year to account for availability of new data. Every year is now a base year.
I have a question.
Yes,
So I
sir.
assume we're going to do this every year now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Based upon the performance metrics that we will be reporting.
Yeah, which is one stream of funding that the college receives. Obviously, we have tuition and fees as well as local taxes.
And what I mean by once a year, we're going to have 3 budget hearings, and is that what we're going to do?
Yes,
You have
sir.
to earn your salary.
Well, I just want to make it clear that we're going to be doing this every year now,
That's correct, Judge.
instead of every 2 years. Okay, thank you.
So the fiscal year 2025 appropriation will not be lower than the fiscal year 23 appropriation of $31,545,292. That is the worst case scenario. If we did not meet performance metrics, we will not go below this amount. It's a guarantee in our appropriation
For this one biennium.
for this one.
So the state promises that amount of money if we don't meet our criteria.
in 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Recall that we have $38,675,000 in the budget for the appropriation. And so the coordinating board plans to approve fiscal years 24 and 25 final rules in January and April 2024, respectively. As presented to you last week, this slide shows the various scenarios for different salary increases. As a refresher, each column projects what each salary increase scenario would include. Each column compares, for example, in the 1% column, each column compares projected revenues to baseline budget, resulting in $11,927,445. Then each column has the critical needs of $1,202,970. The salary enhancement row will vary depending on the salary increase. In this particular case, in the 1%, $929,050. The budget surplus before additional funding request is $9,795,425. And when you consider additional funding requests of $2,559,114, there is a budget surplus for biennium reserve of $7,236,311 in the 1% column. Contrast that to the 6% column, where you have a additional funding request budget surplus for biennium reserve of $2,591,061.
I have a question. Do we have a policy that speaks to how much, like what the goal is in terms of what we would want to see as a budget surplus? Is there any policy that we've set to say we would like this certain percentage, or is it set by amount?
There is not. There's not any policy, Ms. Sanchez, that refers to having a biennium reserve of any nature. We're recommending a biennium reserve just given that this is the first time that we're going into this funding mechanism. And we obviously, the college has had a focus on outcomes for a significant period of time, and this new formula bodes well for us. But we did see an impact from the pandemic based on enrollment, And we did see in 22, we saw an impact on completion. And those are, enrollment is no longer part of the formula, but completion is a part of the formula. This current one is using a 3-year rolling average. The next fiscal year will not use a 3-year rolling average. It'll use actual outcomes. So that's the reason that we're cautious. I anticipate that we'll do well. We may not do $7.1 million well per year.
And so with this surplus or with this reserve, we keep it there and what I'm hearing then is it builds from year to year or?
No.
No. Okay.
This would be a one-time reserve. I'd ask Mr. Flores to respond to that.
Sure. So in order to balance the budget, if we have $9 million additional revenue and we gave $5 million as a salary increase, we'd put the $4 million into also a budgeted expense item to balance the budget. And it would sit there until we need it. So in this particular case, the budget reserve serves in case the appropriation for next year does not pan out and our performance metrics do not come in as designed. Then if our appropriation went down in the following year, we would have the ability to go into that budget reserve and remove it to balance the budget.
Does our GASB requirements enter into this discussion at all?
GASB enters into every budget discussion that we have with our folks from finance. So GASB 68 and 75, they go up in certain years, they come down in certain years, but I'll allow our finance folks to respond directly to that, Mr. Uxer.
The way that they impact our budget, Mr. Uxer, is every year we don't know what that amount is that's going to be passed on to us from TRS and ERS, which handle the retirement and health insurance. They do pass on that cost to us, and we absorb it by budget surplus. We've been able to absorb that over the years by budget surpluses, but that is passed on to us. We do not budget for impact of the GASBs.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, the GASB is a requirement to fund retirements. Our obligation for retirements.
Healthcare and retirement.
And healthcare retirements, in other words, okay. And so right now, what is our GASB balance that we possess versus what is our obligation?
Sure. So the unfunded liability that we have for the TRS pension is about $25 million. We're going to have to cover that unfunded liability, and then Anna for the 87 million for the health insurance portion of the unfunded liability.
So we have $100 million sitting out there somewhere that we need to come up with.
We have covered that.
Well, how do we cover it?
Well, we've covered it in the sense that when GASB 68 rolled out the impact of TRS unfunded liability, we absorbed it into our fund balance. It decreased our fund balance by about $25 million in 2014. So then in 2016, here comes GASB 75 and hit our books for about $75 million. So there again, we absorbed that into our fund balance, but our fund balance went negative at that point because it was a lot to absorb. Since then, because of HERF lost revenue and different budget surpluses, we've made up that stagger on the negative fund balance.
So we have no fund balance. I mean, we don't have an obligation for any of the GASB requirements right now.
Right now, we have the unfunded liabilities covered. We've absorbed that long-term liability.
Okay, so that money is sitting where?
It's sitting in fund balance.
Okay, but physically, do we have certificates of obligation?
That fund balance is invested in two different investment pools.
Uh-huh.
So it's invested.
So, and that is separate from this right here. So we've got 6-digit numbers, 9-digit numbers sitting out there somewhere. So,
That is correct.
So when now does TRS start calling in that money? How does that money? When we have the money and you retire, how do you get your money out of there? does
what-
TRS call on us and say, hey, give her some money, or?
What happens is, the measurement period for the GASBs is 1 year in a lag. So all the books are kept by the state for TRS and ERS. They keep all the books. And so they have an CPA firm that audits their books, but because it's so large, it takes, the information is 1 year in arrears. When that happens, those actuaries go in and estimate how much money is going out, the life expectancy of people, the return on their portfolio supporting the different plans, and then they make adjustments for that every year. And then they,
What I'm saying is, we're sitting here with 100 million, bunches of money or zero, and all of a sudden, we need to give the people that retire some money. Okay, and so right now, we got it covered. Okay.
we do.
Okay, and so now is another, the second GASB was a surprise. And the big, is there another GASB out there coming around at us?
I would imagine
There are, it seems like they've opened up the floodgates with GASBs lately, and Ms. Zuniga will attest to that because they've come back with GASB 84, 85, and then now there's a new GASB on subscription-based software purchases that Ms. Zuniga's office is working through. Incidentally, Ms. Zuniga is chair of the Financial Reporting Requirements Committee for the 50 community colleges.
Okay.
So
if
they're
I guess-
working on the GASBs. So every year there's been GASBs, but they don't have as large of an impact on our fund balance as these do. These are historic in nature. The others are very small, Mr. Uxer.
You tell me we're not ever gonna have another historic one. Who knows? But at least we've got our obligations as far as retirement and health met,
Yes, sir.
and we're nominally okay. So we don't know where, so when it enters into this, we don't need to worry about making sure that we have our money in this budget to go there and cover that.
That's correct, Mr. Uxer, and I think your question is timely, just given during the pandemic, we obviously saw significant declines in enrollment, but we saw significant increases in the number of retirements that we saw. We had a number of faculty and staff that, said, I didn't sign up to teach all online courses, and so we saw some significant retirements. I would imagine that we'll start to feel that impact as we go forward, because as Mr. Flores indicated, the timeline is a year lag. And so we've had more significant retirements over the past 2 to 3 years than we would normally see in a regular year pre-pandemic, if you will.
In the larger scheme of things, right now, TRS conceptually, if they need money for, they'll come to us for our percentage of the obligation. We got it covered. And it's our anticipation that the way the normal budget cycle and the way you've managed that, so we're okay. We're not looking at any outside obligations that sneak up on us.
Currently, we are not.
Okay, okay. I just want to make sure that, because I remember the last GASB hit us hard.
Yep.
But we've got retirements and health, our obligation for retirements and health care.
The way that is currently formulated, we currently are covered. I say that very cautiously.
There was 1 year where the governor decided not to pay us our health care.
Okay. I mean,
And
that's.
we had to come up with a boatload of money.
2013.
Called a historic event.
Yeah, well, I'm just, what they're trying to say is, as of today, but tomorrow.
I know, I understand that, but I want to make sure that, in the larger scope of things, we also have some obligations, but our obligations and that are covered. Any event, you can hypothesize any bad event coming in, but as it stands right now, our expectation is that they're not going to come back on us, and as we know that some of the other, both the schools, the public schools, as well as some other community colleges that are in deep kimchi if things go south.
I think that's an accurate
Okay,
statement.
but we're okay.
currently.
And we're not required to cover other colleges that have not budgeted for their retirement.
No, we're not.
But Mr. Haggerty is correct. In 2013, they cut our health insurance by 50%.
That's correct.
So we absorbed like $7 million back when our health appropriation. I'm sorry, sir?
I said, that's your pocket change. I know that you squirreled $7 million in this thing right here.
There's no squirreling.
I'm not supposed to use squirreled in such funds. Those are bad words.
Very bad. I do have another question, just really quick. So, does any of this, in terms of the reserves, does that, you know, when you get evaluated by bonding agencies, do they review that? How does that factor into some of this?
Go ahead, Ms. Flores. They absolutely do, Ms. Sanchez, and we just had a call with S&P in the last couple of weeks. Go ahead, Mr. Flores.
We just did entertain a surveillance review by S&P Global, which is a common thing to review our credit worthiness. So as individuals, we look at a FICO score, a personal score. For entities and governmentals, we use rating agencies to evaluate our ability to pay our debt. So we had a review on here recently last week, and so they looked at our financial profile and indicators that we have. Our fund balance is a huge indicator of a company's ability to manage budgets, build surpluses, and build balance enough in case of emergencies. Fund balances, our auditors would like to see a 15% of budget fund balance. Rating agencies would like to see 25% of your budget as a fund balance. But the only thing I would say is the world keeps changing dramatically. Insurance rates are moving all over the place with global warming, impact of weather. The rating agency asked us questions. How do we compensate? It's called ESG, environmental, social, and governmental changes. They are actually looking at weather-related changes and what entities do related to that. We don't have those problems here because we sit next to Mount Franklin, middle of Texas. But when you look at schools in Houston, you have San Jac, Lone Star, Houston, a lot of smaller schools. When the hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast, they had a big impact on their buildings, those kind of things. So rating agencies look to a variety of things, and they look to management to see how you plan for those kinds of risks. Fund balance is a huge indicator of entities' ability to plan, build surpluses in case you need it going forward. For those kind of things you can't predict.
If my memory serves correctly, our fund balance, we received a kudos or positive review when we financed for the building program we just finished. It actually turned out to be positive and kept our rating high and our interest rates low. Is that right?
That is correct. But there are challenges as well. During that call, Mr. Flores was quick to point out to the analysts from S&P, some of our colleagues, you know, it's all public information, and we saw that some of our sister institutions had significantly more debt than our institution has and yet had a higher rating. And so we have concerns with that, and so we brought it to their attention. Or Mr. Flores brought it to their attention very appropriately.
Ms. Zuniga did a review of the financial statements for the top 10 community colleges. So she went to their balance sheet and she pulled their fund balances down. So of the top 10 community colleges in Texas, there's 4 that have negative fund balances overall. And of those 10 community colleges, because the other thing that rating agencies look at is long-term debt. What is your obligation in the future? So the other thing that she pulled down is off their balance sheet is their long-term debt. 7 of the 10 top community colleges in Texas have over $500 million of long-term debt sitting on their financial statements. So our financials look pretty good in comparison. That's why Dr. Serrata is saying we pointed out to them that our rating for S&P is A+, which means strong. But we always try to do better, right? So we know that they looked at our financial metrics and a couple of other indicators that they measure, and we pointed out to them the other top 10 community colleges which had higher ratings in some cases, but they had negative fund balance. In other cases, they were higher, but they're carrying $700 million worth of debt, right? So we pointed out several things. Dr. Serrata, Dr. Smith, Ms. Zuniga, and I, and Ms. Shaughnessy, long distance, were on that conversation. And so we pointed out those differences in our financials.
Do you think it'll make any difference?
We'll know in about a month. There were two analysts that were on the call, and they asked a lot of very good questions, but they take it to a committee. They'll take it to another committee, and then they'll present what they heard from us. So in another month, we'll find out. So what has happened is the rules for evaluating colleges and governmentals has changed. So there's like 12 community colleges in the state of Texas that are under review as well, that use S&P as an insurer for debt. So we all had to undergo that surveillance review.
Just get back to my original question. There's a fund balance sitting out there. It's an obligation we have for retirement and medical, and we're positive. We don't have a negative. We don't have a red number on the balance sheet, and things. You know, you can always anticipate something bad, but as things look, we can continue to be able to cover our obligations.
Currently, we're in a strong position.
That's a yes. Golly. Okay. I just want to make sure that, you know, because at one point we were worried about the FUD. GASB was going to affect, would affect us, but we got covered what we owe theoretically.
Yes, sir.
Or potentially, let's put that. Okay.
So during the last budget presentation, we recommended a 4% salary increase because of the amount it would allow for us to help fiscal year 25, because it is more sustainable in case appropriations do not pan out. If you give a higher increase, you cannot take it back as it rolls from year to year. If the appropriation declines, you can use the reserve to fund the budget, should the budget need it. So that's why we are in the 4% column with that surplus going into the biennium reserve of $4,449,161.
Question, what is our, do we do hourly rates for any of our employees?
We do.
So what's the hourly rate for our employees right now? The lowest hourly rate that we offer them?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's about $7.49.
So New Mexico pays their employees $12 per hour. So I do think, and I don't know if this is part of the factoring in terms of the increases to what we're looking at least increasing that. I mean, $7.25 in Texas has been in the books for such a long time.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how many employees are at that hourly rate, but as a community college, I think we need to look, as a governmental entity, I think we need to look beyond that to increase it. So I don't know if this would be the appropriate time, or in terms of today's action, to look at that and to increase that. And I know I was not here at this last meeting, so I apologize for that, but that is something that I think is really, really important, because they have done an analysis in other meetings that I've sat in with other governmental entities, and the community college is at the low end in terms of paying its hourly rate employees. And I just don't think that's appropriate, especially if we are looking for a salary increase, well-deserved, for our staff and our administrators and our faculty. That should also include our hourly rate employees. And so however we can get there to increase it, I think would be appropriate. So I don't know if there's a recommendation on that, or what can we do to look at that?
Yeah, this recommendation, Ms. Sanchez, is an across-the-board recommendation, so it impacts each of the respective salaried employees, as well as our faculty, our staff, administrators, at the same percentage. The hourly rate employees are also, at least those that are full-time, also have the benefit package of the institution as well. And that's something that we present to the board their respective salaries, we don't necessarily incorporate all of the benefit package that comes in. When in my past career, we used to calculate that at about 28%. I would imagine it's higher now. I would imagine it's somewhere between 30 and 32%. I'd look to the finance folks. But that is something that we do not incorporate. We provide the actual wage, but we don't incorporate all of the benefit package that the institution provides. But we're certainly willing to look at those. There is a significant, we have a lot of student workers. And so student workers are coming to the college, they're enrolled, they're taking coursework, they're on financial aid, and in addition to that, they're also working at the institution. We accommodate their schedules. Most supervisors at the institution accommodate their schedules where we know their students first. And you need to study, go study, but then you make up your hours, you work those 19 hours a week and what have you. So I certainly appreciate it, and that is, you're absolutely correct. That's what we saw during the pandemic. During the pandemic, as we came out of the pandemic, and currently still, we have entry-level positions that are paying $15, $16, $17 an hour for service-related sectors, and students are choosing to go into those rather than coming into college. We saw that in particular in the fall of 20 and in the fall of 21. We recovered in the fall of 22, and currently we're continuing to move forward, and we're currently trending up right now for the fall as well. Our work study program does pay $10 an hour currently, but we do have a segment of the population at the institution that is at that $7.83, if I'm not mistaken.
How many individuals would you say?
I'd ask Mr.
Do you know
Flores and
how
his
many?
staff.
I don't.
I think
I don't,
this,
but-
this brings up mine. I think we run a real danger here if we start saying a blanket $12 here and $7 here. If we're going to get into that kind of comparison, then we need to have a breakout of who gets and what's that, how we evaluate, is the $12 what's in that. As pointed out, if you look at it's 30%, our $7 figure now is up to roughly $10 an hour. Okay, and how does that equate then if we add in all the, if we're going to, we can't just say, oh, $7 versus $12, we need to do something.
Well, I do. I think that just in general, as a matter of principle, I think one of the criticisms in terms of this particular entity, I'll talk about the community college just in general, and it's really not a criticism, it's just an observation. And in terms of where the state is in terms of paying its workers at $7.25. If you factor in inflation, if you factor in cost of living expenses, and how we've been able to still be at $7.25 for all those years. And of course, all those factors, and of course, Mr. Uxer, I think you bring up great points in terms of, wait, let's do an assessment. It might be different because we're factoring in other components, such as Dr. Serrata said, these are students, we're working with their schedule, there might be some flexibility there, are they getting tuition enhancements? I don't know those.
Well, I think that's the idea.
Right.
Just let's talk, are we really talking apples and apples?
Right.
But once it,
Yeah.
just something like that, if we have $7, 12 hours, that then begs the question, let's talk about, let's find out more information.
Absolutely, and I bring that up now, and again, I don't know if it's fair to do it at this point, but I do think we really have to have a serious discussion if that we are looking to give everybody a certain percentage of an increase, but not the lowest paid hourly employees. I think, especially in terms of the folks that we serve as students, especially in terms of the financial situation of our students, especially in light of us being a disadvantaged community, I think we really need to take a serious look at that, to take a step at that. Again, perhaps it is not this budget cycle if we're a little bit above that, but we have to put that on the table, and I want to make sure that at least my opinion here is voiced to say that $7.25 for our lowest paid employees at the college is unacceptable.
Especially when, for example, us at Burger King, when I do marketing for Burger King, we're offering $13 an hour to start. When you're talking about somebody in the kitchen, right out of high school, and you're working at a community college at $7.49, whatever it is, that our lowest paid is, it's just.
And our student workers, at least in the district, they don't get fringe benefits because they're 19 hours, so you can't throw in that additional amount.
That's correct.
They
That's
just
correct,
get
Dr.
what they get, but even there, they're at $15 or $18.
Right.
I brought this up, 3 months ago?
Yes.
That was ridiculous.
Yes.
It's embarrassing.
Just our current structure is, are these, the $7 figure and the salaries, all that, was that all covered under the Evergreen study? I mean, it was Evergreen across the board?
It was.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Arts, I didn't hear your
Answer?
question. Were you talking about like on the hourly rate?
The compensation study
The
that the college.
compensation, yeah, the
just
compensation covered all categories,
It did.
okay? And so what we're saying is that the Evergreen study is now, given current events, is probably
did. It could be.
not, I mean.
It could be
it's worth-
dated, sure.
It's worth looking at if we're looking at these kinds of numbers elsewhere.
It could be dated. Again, I'd remind us, we do pay our work studies $10 an hour. We're not at the district level, but we do pay them $10 an hour.
I thought we were at 9,
10.
10.
10?
Yes, ma'am.
The county rate is
My question is, does a college kid have the right to go, does Burger King hire part-time?
I'm sorry?
Part-time?
Yes, we do.
And what do you pay?
$13 to start.
Oh, you can work here at the college for this amount, or you can go down to Burger King and work for this amount. Let's do the math.
And Dr. Graham is absolutely correct. Her and Ms. Nahara did voice the hourly rate issue before, and in meeting and discussing that request to look at that, we met with Dr. Peña, and one of the considerations is if we raise the bottom end for a certain category, then it creates compression between those employees that have been here for a while and don't get the benefit of the bottom end but have been here years and years and
So
get a
they
little bit
resign
higher.
and go
So it's a bigger,
higher. It's a game we're playing.
yeah.
I mean, it's just something I think serious. I think people pay attention. I've had constituents ask me that
I
question.
had to.
Your college pays $7.25.
Plus
per hour rate.
benefits.
No,
At-
not for the part-time kids, don't get benefits.
He just said that we give them the benefits.
No, if they're
Verify.
part-timers, yeah. If they're part-timers, Judge, they do not. But again, our student workers are at $10 an hour.
And that
So-
part-timer has the right to go over to Burger King and work for $13 an hour.
So
We're a community
everybody here
college,
has
Judge.
the right to go elsewhere.
We're a community college. We're sitting precedent. How does that look?
How does that
Depending how many hours they work, if they work more than the TRS 50%, then they would get benefits, depending how many hours they work. But it's graduated on depending how many hours employees work. If they work less than 20 hours, then they would not get benefits, but a lot of ours work
So the
more
bulk of
than,
them are higher underneath, so
I
that
think-
we don't have to pay the.
I think all this comes back to the idea that we really need to study in light of current events. You know, I mean, Evergreen study looked at El Paso as a whole, you know, the larger El Paso, and did a comparison. And now we're saying, hey, if we're looking at 7, 10, 13, 12, we need to go back and look at the whole thing all over again.
Well, be careful with that, because it might come back to surprise us.
Well,
That we
wait a
are
minute.
way underpaying.
In other words, if things are bad, we want to keep our head in the sand.
Well, that's, I'm just saying, if we go for a study, be prepared to put a lot more money.
Hey, if that, wait a minute, we're saying if that's fair, that fair is fair.
I
We
didn't
need to
say
fi-
it was fair, and neither did she, and neither did Bunny, and neither did Ms. Roberts.
Oh, you don't think, you don't,
I mean, I hear what you're saying in terms of the study. I think the recommendation is, I forgot when was the last time we did the Evergreen,
We
but there's
did.
always a period of time in which you do it. I just think, you know, if part of the assessment is on the hourly employees, I mean, I haven't done a critical analysis in terms of what that previous study looked at and what the assessment was on the hourly rate. I'm saying, just for me,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to be able to do that. If it's not for this budget cycle, then we should very well make that at least a priority or something that we look at. If that gets rolled into an evergreen study that we need to do.
well, I don't think we
then
want to go
that-
evergreen again.
Then that's what we do, but I
Yeah.
do think that is appropriate and
We- yeah, we
fair,
need to-
right?
yeah,
You
if
gotta
we-
pay people,
If we're
Adequately.
undervaluing things, hey,
Absolutely.
let's find
The
out.
other
get it
question,
fixed.
the other question I have is how many of those jobs are not filled? Because they
Which-
said, you're not paying me enough, I'm gonna go work at Burger King. How many are not filled?
So when the, in 2020, when the pandemic was raging and we had to implement cost constraints to control the budget because there was a lot of uncertainty on all our revenue streams, we did not refill part-time positions. And so we cut back a very large percentage of our part-timers. And we have not refilled a lot of those. We don't track those by position. We don't track those in our budget by position. We just look at a pool for part-time hires if they need that, but we don't keep a specific number for a number of part-time.
We have no idea how many people are making $725 an hour.
We do have, we can pull that information and get a number for that. How many are currently working?
Now, my question is that if you offer this job to an individual and he knows that he can go over to Burger King, but he decides to stay here at this cost.
Yeah, it's a good question, Judge. To my knowledge, I don't know that we're having a hard time with those type of jobs, student worker jobs, things of that nature. We are having a harder time filling some entry-level positions as well as some higher-level positions at the institution, just based on the market. And it's not unique to us. Currently, obviously, there's a labor shortage across economies, and so we continue to see that. What I would suggest to the board is, from my perspective, this is more cause for us to have a biennium reserve, for us to go ahead and look at that particular areas, look at the hourly employees, do an analysis on what that would cost to increase their wage appropriately or to a level that the board would feel comfortable. That would be another reason for us to have a biennium reserve, so that we wouldn't have to wait a year to necessarily implement that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry I asked.
And I'd reference one other thing. Pre-pandemic, we ranged between 3,200 and 3,300 employees employed at the institution monthly. The latest data that I recall, we're at about 2,500 employees currently. So we became much leaner. We didn't lay off any full-time faculty, staff, or administrator. We tightened the belt. We didn't need part-timers because we didn't have the enrollment that we traditionally had. We weren't on campus, and so we didn't need those respective positions. We've remained lean since the pandemic, despite what we're adding on additional funding requests. Despite that, we've remained very lean at the institution.
Is it logical then that is at some point as the student attendance increases that we will go back?
We will increase. I don't anticipate that we'll get to 3,300 employees in the near future, but we will increase as we need to serve the student population that we have.
So in summary, our recommendation is a 4% salary increase for eligible full-time and part-time faculty and staff. This would allow for a sustainable budget for 2025 in case the state appropriations are reduced due to lower performance outcomes or metrics, just in case, and allows for establishing a biennium reserve of $4,449,161 that will provide additional funding if needed in fiscal year 2025. So should the board approve a 4% salary enhancement, this is what the budget would look like that would be presented on August 30th. So the budget would have a baseline budget of $146,226,745. Additional funding needs must be funded. Critical needs would amount to $1,202,970. A 4% salary enhancement would cost $3,716,200. Additional requests from executive levels total $2,559,114. And with a 4%, it would leave a biennium reserve of $4,449,161. The total budget would be $158,154,190, which is within projected revenues. So next steps would be approval of a salary enhancement by Board of Trustees, finalize revenue projections based on final appropriations from the coordinating board to be received on August the 22nd. We don't expect any changes, but should we have any, we would adjust the budget going on August the 30th, should there be any. And so a next step as well is acceptance of certified appraisal roll at the August 30th board meeting, adoption of a fiscal year 23-24 budget at the August 3rd board meeting as well. Also at that meeting, recommendation of the 2023 tax rate. After that, Ms. Deis's area would roll the budget into our ERP system. And then September 1 would be the start of the new fiscal year. And that concludes the presentation. Are there any other questions?
How many, the Central Appraisal District appraised money, I guess, last year?
They're doing it annually.
How much money did we lose from that amount that you told us we were gonna get from protests?
So I don't have the number of the protests that have reduced the taxable valuation, but our taxable valuation went up to $61.5 billion. It increased by $6 billion from the prior year. It went up substantially.
'Cause I know there's always an argument with the oil place down there. They always fight it. I'm sure the fountains fight it. I'm sure the big malls fight it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So I'm sure that we have to send money back.
The number of protests have gone up because the valuations went up. And so what happens is, because there are so many protests, the certified values that are given to us to calculate our tax revenue is adjusted down by 2.8% to allow for all those protests. So we have a very conservative number booked as tax revenue. When the levies are mailed out in October of every year, those include all properties, even those under protest. So generally, because of our budgeting practice being conservative, our tax revenue actual comes in about $2 million higher than what we budget for. So we budget considering all those protests.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Are there any other questions?
Judge.
Any other questions? Okay, Pam, read 5.2.
Excuse me, item 5.2.
Thank you
You're welcome.
for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I call you by your first name.
You can call us on.
Works for me.
All right, thank you.
Item 5.2, discussion and action to approve salary increases for employees of the El Paso County Community College District for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Okay, any motion?
Can I just, can I ask a question, or do we have to have a motion first to do something?
If there's any you can ask questions
All right.
before, that's up to you.
I have a question. So, Dr. Graham, I know when we had first started the budget presentation, and I know we had some individuals come up for a public comment that were advocating for the 6% increase. What was that based on? I know that they had specifically said we want 6%, but I just kind of wanted a little bit more if you know. I mean, I don't know. If that's
I
fair.
don't know the answer, the ones that came to ask. I know the answer to why, I brought out that we've never had, in the past, all the years I've been on the board, such a healthy budget as we have now. The economy is not doing well for a lot of people. Obviously, employees are delivering results, the college is doing good, we've got a big challenge ahead of us to increase even more on the performance based, outcomes based. And my opinion is that because we have such a healthy budget, we should go at 6%. I will not vote for a 4% or a 5%, but the rest of you can decide that. I think that the employees need that kind of a salary, and that we have the money to be able to afford it right now. And I know something could go wrong, but then something could stay right, and we could get even more money in the future. Because
so
I
what-
do
what-
have,
what- what
hold
is-
on, it's my turn.
Yeah, I'm
Because
just gonna
it-
ask you a question. Go ahead, finish and
Because
then I'll ask you a
it
question.
has, we have the potential to do even greater things, and I believe in our staff, and I truly, honestly believe that they're going to deliver the outcomes that we're looking for, and that we're bringing in more funds. Now, that's my opinion. If you all want to vote for 4, it's on you. My opinion is 6%.
Can I ask you a question now?
Sure, you can ask me again
Okay,
if you
so
want.
this new program that we don't even know is gonna work or not, doesn't hit. And we give this huge raise. Where are you gonna get the money to cover it if we don't hit that projection?
First of all, I just said, my faith and my belief is in our staff. They've delivered results before. I'm not gonna be one of those that says, oh no, they're not gonna come up to par with what they're supposed to be doing. So I don't adhere to the mentality that you do, that what if they don't? I believe
But what if
that
they
they'll
don't?
rise to the expectation.
But what if they don't?
I don't buy that notion. I know they will.
Okay.
Can I ask another question? I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, so I know, at least since I've been here on the board, we do it by percentages and it's varied, right? Have we, I don't know, like, do we look at it in terms of like, and do an assessment or an analysis in terms of what we're looking at, the cost of living adjustments, right? What that looks like year by year and say, okay, so now we're gonna base it on this, based on what we've looked at. And then I guess secondly to that, have we ever considered, I mean, and this is like a huge undertaking, so obviously not this pay period, but at step increases, right? So step increases as they are merited, so, right, you have a good performance evaluation, and so then you would then get the additional 2%, so you get, say for example, like, just for an example, 4% is your COLA increase, and then you do the 2% for the step increase, so that comes out to the 6. To break it down like that, have we looked at that, or what are we?
So it's a great
doing?
question, Ms. Sanchez.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. When we have recommended in the past, and normally, pre-pandemic, our normal recommendation was to try to stay at a 3% annual COLA, essentially. And that was within CPI.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
within those mechanisms. Usually CPI was running at 2.1%. Sometimes it dropped to 1.9, and so we would recommend a 3%. And the college historically has done across the board kind of salary enhancements. And so what they've done is we have done a recommendation for all faculty and staff and administrators, and traditionally it has been 3%. I remind the board that in 2020 we didn't do anything because we were in
Right.
such unknown territory. We didn't anticipate the HERF resources that the federal government provided. We then did 2% in 21 because we thought that that's what the budget, and then we saw the HERF resources coming in, and they not only came in for students, but they came in for staff as well. We provided, the board provided 3 one-time payments for full-time faculty and staff that amounted to $6,500. We did part-time as well. Those amounted, if I'm not mistaken, to $2,500, I believe. And last year, the board, we recommended a 4% last year. The board chose to do 5%. I certainly appreciate that and understand that. And as you saw what Mr. Flores did, the budget has room throughout. So, and the board asked us to look at, to get rid of 0 and to look at 1 to 6, so we've included that. With regards to merit, what you're essentially referencing is a merit-based system. I've been a part of merit-based systems in my past. You have folks that receive merit and they're very happy and very quiet, and you have folks that don't necessarily receive merit and they're very upset and they're very loud. The college has not move forward with that kind of a mechanism. We've always done it across the board. And I support what we've done. I think it's merited, and I think it is appropriate. With regards to STEP, because you mentioned STEP, the only ones that, to my knowledge, that theoretically have a STEP is our faculty. Because what we do with the faculty is we say a portion of this percentage is gonna go to the STEP, and we adjust those tables, and then the rest is gonna go in essentially as a COLA. They'll receive, if the board votes today to do 3%, then they would essentially get a 2% plus the 1% that would go to STEP.
Right.
If the board did 4, and more than likely would be 2 and 2, they would receive the 4%, but those tables are adjusted.
Right.
That has helped the college because our faculty, if and when we do another compensation and classification study, those tables are adjusted. What'll happen is, from my experience, is that they'll say, you're low on entry, and so you're gonna have to adjust those, and then the compression will reach up to about the
Right.
midpoint.
Right.
And this is where,
Yeah.
I'll be very honest with the board, there's some trepidation because our senior faculty who do phenomenal work, more than likely in a compensation study will not be rewarded for that phenomenal work.
That happened
Because
before, right?
it did.
The last one.
It did. And they were unhappy and very vocal, and I don't blame them for being unhappy. This is why an across-the-board impacts all employees at the same level. It's why I support it. Again, but we don't do that with staff. We don't adjust the tables with staff, and so over time, that's become much more difficult. That's why we're having somewhat of an issue in hiring some of our entry-level staff positions.
Why don't we do this then?
It is something that the administration and I are considering, Judge, and we'd have to work on that over a period of time.
So it'd be like a professional, so when you're saying staff, we're talking.
Non-faculty
like a-
positions, sure.
Okay, right.
Yeah, non-faculty
Right, right.
positions.
So
But it
like,
would work the same way, right? You get a 4% raise, and so much would go towards their step, and so much, the balance would go into their salary, or
It doesn't work like that for staff currently.
why not?
It's just not something that the college has done. And that,
But it is possible.
it is possible, sure. But
it's gonna
that,
cost money.
that's right. There
It's
would
gonna
be
cost a lot of money.
there's a cost for that as well.
and and I guess in some ways it kind of like makes sense, because, I mean, I have no problem, obviously, voting on increases for staff. I think we understand what the economic climate is, we understand, quite frankly, I think, how hard everyone, I think, with the college works, and that's why I think the college has such a great reputation. But I think what we do have to take into consideration, if not this year or next year, but for future boards as well, is just, how do we not come up with like an arbitrary percentage, right? From one year to the next, it's 5%, it's 4%, it's 6%. Not only from a financial standpoint is that kind of difficult, I think, to kind of figure out, but also, quite frankly, it's not, I think, mindful of what the expectations are for the employees here as well, to give them some certainty as we keep moving along.
I think that's incredibly fair, Ms. Sanchez. And so again, pre-pandemic, we traditionally tried to bring to the board a 3% because that accounted for CPI, and it still was a raise for our employees. And so that's where we did it. The pandemic changed everything. And so between the pandemic and its impact on enrollment, subsequent the labor shortage, and the impact on being able to recruit folks, and the impact of inflation, I think that's why the board chose last year to look at a 5% increase because of those factors that were in there. I certainly respect Dr. Graham's opinion, and I certainly understand that by and large, we are still dealing with a significant amount of inflation, although it has come down. It's hovering about 3.6% currently. And that's, again, the recommendation of 4. We take that into consideration as we move forward with that. Again, though, we've provided that information to the board.
And
Yes,
coming
ma'am.
into the, right before the pandemic, we didn't anticipate, of course, that was gonna happen, but, we made drastic changes and putting a huge burden on the staff to deal with the pandemic.
Yes, ma'am.
And they came through
They stepped up.
and really did a great job, phenomenal job with the challenges that we faced. as, you know, or that they faced in their respective roles. And, you know, during the pandemic, it kept the college going very well. Now, you know, post-pandemic, the college is thriving, it's moving forward. We have a strong budget, we have the funds. Why not go the 6%? And then next year, if the numbers are not there, if the enrollment doesn't continue going up, then they know that there won't be a good increase, you know, for the following year.
You know, well, I completely agree with you, Dr. Graham, that they've stepped up to the plate. Our employees are fantastic and they're wonderful. I have also, and I have complete total faith that they're gonna do it this year, and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna do awesome. But I also have complete and total faith in our finance department, who were tasked to come up with these numbers and tell us what we can do and what would be a good idea. Now, you know, quite frankly, I think going right in the middle, not 4%, you know, because I know you're being conservative, I'm sure, as we always are, go to 5%, and then we'll see next year. Because this is we're in a whole new, it's a whole new thing this year. We don't know what it's gonna be like. We don't
But the
know.
college has been focused on outcomes-based for a while.
I agree, but we don't know how much money we're gonna get this year. We have no clue. So with that said, why not do 5%? And then next year, relook at it again and maybe
And that
increase
can
it
be
at that
your vote. You
point.
have the right to go for 5%.
So with that
Just
said, I make a
like you can
motion
go
that
for
we,
0% or 5%, 3%.
with that said, I make a motion that we give a 5% salary increase.
Do we have a second?
I'll make a motion that we go with staff recommendation. I presume that you support, actually, Dr. Fernandez, his presentation was to the board, but we don't, the board doesn't, he doesn't report to the board, he reports to you. And so I think, and you support his recommendation, and so we look to the CEO of this organization to his best evaluation. So I would recommend that we follow their recommendation and that we have a salary enhancement of 4%.
So go ahead, Mitchell, take it.
Yeah.
We have to
That's,
vote
I
on
was
that.
gonna wait for leaving
We
council.
gotta see if Bonnie has a second to her motion. Anybody second Ms. Nara's motion for a 5% raise? I'm gonna go one more time. Anybody second Bonnie's recommendation? Okay, now you make a motion for,
We go to 4%.
okay, do we have a second for 4%?
Fantastic.
Okay, I second the 4%. Any discussion? Okay, call a question.
Mr. Uxer,
Aye.
Mrs. Robles,
No.
Ms. Naheda,
No.
Dr. Graham,
No,
Ms. Sanchez,
No.
Mr. Haggerty.
Aye. Okay, do you have another motion?
I make a motion, we go with 6%.
I second the motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Call the question.
Can I have
Oh,
one?
we have another discussion.
Another
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
So, I will vote for the 6%, but I really do, and I don't know if this gives us this room, but we have to really seriously consider the minimum wage situation and issue. I know you talked about, you know, about being able to do it. I know I kind of brought this up like a little bit in the last minute, but we really have got to bring that to the forefront. If not this budget session, maybe looking at it as we go along into next budget session, because I cannot support everybody else getting an increase without our lowest paid employees at $7.25
Can we
an hour.
add that to the motion?
Well, it's
we-
based on the reserves.
That's
though,
correct.
Right?
That's correct. What I would respond to Sanchez first, certainly appreciate the guidance and the advocacy for all employees of the institution. Again, our work-study employees went from $9 to $10 an hour. Their responsibility and their first and foremost responsibility is as students. And so as they work, we did raise them to $10 an hour. We will do an analysis. I would remind the board that there is a reserve on each of the respective percentages. It ranges from 7.2 million and 1% to about 2.6 million at 6%. So we have some room, and what we can do between the biennium reserve as well as vacant positions, because we're always going to be dealing with vacancies, and that provides the college with additional resources. We can look at the hourly. I'll work with finance, with Mr. Flores and his team, to be able to look at that, and we'll bring an analysis to the board. I won't say for next week or in 2 weeks, but we'll bring it in the fall for the board, and then we can.
Maybe for implementation
Sure.
calendar year or something like
Yes,
that.
ma'am.
I think that's a fair, but that's
I
very important.
understand, and I
mean,
certainly
From my
appreciate it.
perspective,
I agree.
like Dr. Graham says, I don't know about any of you. Just kidding, everybody does care. I think that's important. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today, if none of us who are sitting around this table did not care. And so to kind of say that we don't, or if somebody's voting a different way than the other, it doesn't mean that we don't value our employees and what they do. I think it's really just trying to make sense of how best can we accommodate that with a lot of, like you mentioned, the uncertainties of the biennium and, our hourly rate employees. So
And I
wanted to
remind
add that.
anyone who's listening to the meeting, this is the board that is disputing how much of a raise to give. So I cannot thank the board enough for your dedication and appreciation of our faculty, staff, and administrators.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other
That's all.
discussion? You're good, Ms. Sun?
I'm good, Ms.
Okay.
Judge Hagerty.
All right,
Thank you,
Ms.
thank you.
All right, call a question, Beth.
Mr. Uxer,
No.
Mrs. Robles,
Yes.
Ms. Naheda.
Aye.
Dr. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez.
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty.
No. Okay. Let's see.
I would just remind everyone again that this is the board, even those that voted no did not have anything but the best interests of our faculty, staff, and administrators.
Well, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
We're
I
proud
agree.
of our staff. I just want to make sure we have enough money to pay us.
So we can pay them next year. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I'm Irish, and I've always believed in the little leprechaun with the pot of gold, but it's never come true.
Okay.
Okay, no executive session. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So made.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, no problem.